What's a scary story from your childhood? As a teenager I could catch a bus a few blocks from home that would take me to the local station. 2 internet cafes were there. Great memories playing LAN with friends and others. Christmas time and I want to go to the net cafe on Boxing Day. Lucky duck, I got a phone for Christmas. A Nokia 5110. Had to charge it for hours before using. Did that. Used its alarm. So I can wake up on time for the bus ride to the net cafes. Wake up. No alarm. Oh. The alarm is set, but I had set the wrong AM/PM time on the phone. That's okay, I'm only an hour late, and we got all day. Walked down to the highway to catch my bus. Traffic was backed up, which seemed weird. Then noticed there was a road closure and had to catch the bus down the road. Okay, did that. Caught the bus. The bus drives past the bus stop I was supposed to be waiting at. The bus stop had been totaled, flattened. I asked the bus driver what's up. Oh, about an hour and a half ago a car went straight through the bus stop. Killed a bloke who was waiting there. If I had set the clock correctly on my phone I would have been right on time in that spot, at that bus stop. Instead I had a good time at the net cafe. It really didn't dawn on me how it played out until I reviewed the day later on. I'm more freaked out about it these days than when it went down. I was around 12. Wellington in New Zealand, where I grew up, is very hilly, so you'd often get streets built in valleys, etc. Our house's backyard was at the foot of a steep bank that was about 1 story or so high, with more houses up there. One day I saw a dead bird in our backyard. I walked over and saw that someone had carefully and methodically pushed maybe 100 nails all the way into the thing in a tightly packed pincushion grid square arrangement. I vividly remember how little space there was between them and how the flesh in there was like pate. I was super freaked out and I looked up because where else could it have come from? And there at the top of the cliff, backlit by the overcast sky and in silhouette, was a little kid standing silently staring down at me. Absolute creepiest thing I ever saw. One night I woke up to yelling and crashing and walked into the living room to see my dad fist fighting a complete stranger. He fought him and threw him down the stairs into our unfinished basement and locked the door, since that was the only way in or out of there, and called the police. Guy thought nobody was home and decided to try to burglarize the place and walked around the corner and bumped right into my dad in the dark, who was half asleep on his way to the bathroom. When I was about 7, I was visiting at my grandparents' house with my 2 cousins. The house is very secluded on the outskirts of a rural town. My mom, grandmother, and aunt were busy downstairs in a back room spring cleaning. Us 3 girls were upstairs playing. Taking a lunch break, my aunt called out to us from the upstairs kitchen. We walked in the kitchen and she asked us if we had been in her purse to play with her wallet. We said no, and she thought she was missing some money, around $20. Me and one cousin volunteered to look for the money in her car in case it fell out. We went to the car, looked around and found nothing. My cousin accidentally slammed the door and she told me, "Shh, don't tell mom. She hates when I slam the door." I agreed and we went back upstairs. Minutes passed and we all started making sandwiches. My mother looked out the window and said, "Girls, you left the car door open." We ran to the window and we kinda froze for a second. We assured them that we did not leave any car doors open and confessed to actually slamming the door that was open. At this point, things kind of starting feeling creepy. First the wallet, now the car door. After watching the car for a while, we didn't see anyone, and my mom bravely said she would close the door so the interior lights wouldn't run the battery down. Old car. When she went outside and closed the car door, the landline to the house rang. My grandmother answered and her face turned completely white. She started yelling for mother to get in the house and lock the door now. We all got upstairs and we hunkered down in the corner of room while my grandmother called 911. My mother reported feeling someone watching her when she was closing the car door. She also thought she saw a shadow inside our Astro van. Tinted windows. Someone unknown to my grandmother on the phone said, "I know you're in there," and hung up. At this point, we're all scared and crying, waiting 30 to 45 minutes for the cops to show up. Finally we see a police officer in the driveway and we all run outside. He starts taking a report of what happens with the money, car door, and phone call as he's writing everything down. I yelled to my mom, there's smoke coming from the top of the house. Backside, my grandmother freaks thinking she left a pot of beans on the stove and maybe the kitchen caught fire. The police officer looks up and sees the smoke, calls in the fire department and runs inside the house instructing everyone to stay outside. Moments later he comes back outside and is completely bewildered. Nothing is on fire and the smoke outside is gone. Fire department and backup police arrive. They search the house and nearby land. Nothing. To this day, we have no clue what happened, who the person was, where the money went, how they knew my grandmother's phone number, and what caused the smoke. The only speculation we made was the phone call was probably made from inside our van as we had a mobile backphone before cell phones were popular. I was terrified as a kid and still shudder when thinking back on this. When I was about 10 and my brother was 13, we were walking home around dusk and a white panel van pulled up, and a man said our mom had sent him to give us a ride home. Me being completely naive and innocent stared getting in, and my brother right behind me at the last second was suspicious and told me to run with him. So we bolted. Years later I've never forgotten that, and the older I get, the more it freaks me out, but mostly I get mad that we didn't get a license plate and call the cops, because who knows what else that guy did later. When I was around 6 or 7 I said a curse word once in front of my stepbrother at a party at my dad's house, and he put me in the dryer and threatened to turn it on and said he wouldn't let me out until I apologized. I don't know if scary, but kinda bizarre. I was standing on a bridge over a small lake with a bunch of friends. When I was about 9, some older kid came up behind me and picked me up and threw me over the ledge into the lake, maybe about 10 to 15 feet down. I swam to the edge and the guy came up to me and said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were someone else." When I was about 11 over 12, my mom lived in an apartment building, and the door to her apartment was next to a hall with the stairs. One day, we were heading out to the store, so I opened the door and there was a man standing outside our door. He was immediately spooked and took off running down the stairs and out of our building, and we never saw him again. Scared me very much, and I still often wonder if he was just listening outside our door or what. When I was around 9 years old, I was on vacation with my mom. The hotel gave our room key in the middle of the night to some random man claiming it was his room. Luckily the chain was drawn, but the man was very drunk and stood there yelling into the room. It took me years before I would stay in a hotel again. When I was 3 and my older brother was 5, he was doing some homework at the coffee table in the living room. While I ran around playing, he turned his pencil over to erase something as I ran by, and I happened to trip at that moment and fall onto the pencil. It went into my right eye. Bro pulled the pencil out of my eye. As soon as he realized what happened, I started screaming, which brought my parents from the next room. They couldn't get a straight story out of the two of us, and there was no blood, so we moved on with our evening. Went to bed. The next morning, I had fluid from my eye, dried on my cheek and my eye looked deflated. We went to the hospital. They found the injury and took me into surgery to close the wound in my eye. I'm surprisingly okay. My vision on that side sucks because I have scarring to the back of my eyeball, but the pencil didn't go further. I wear corrective glasses that enable me to see fairly well with that eye. As imaging technology has progressed, I've even gotten to see what the injury looks like at the eye doctor. That was cool for me because everyone else looked at my injury at the doctor's office for years when I was a kid, but I could never see it. There's a little graphite mark at the back of my eye, so yeah, my eyeball got impaled on a pencil, but I'm fine now. I was riding my bike around my town when a car full of people started following me and then started passing me really close and then driving around the block to do it again. After 2 of these, I took off down an alley to avoid them, but they followed me. One of the people in the backseat rolled down their window, pointed a gun at me, and pulled the trigger. At that point I made a beeline for my friend's house riding down the sidewalk on a one-way street going opposite traffic. I jumped my friend's fence and pulled my bike over into his lawn. Then I burst into his house and called the police. Now as an adult, I have thought about it, and I'm nearly certain that the gun was a fake or a pellet gun or something. There was no sound and no muzzle flash, but back then I was totally messed up for like a year after that. I was terrified of being alone and I always looked over my shoulder whenever I was walking or riding my bike anywhere. I started imagining that car everywhere I went and freaked out whenever I saw one that looked like it. I'm not sure when I got over it, but it took a long time. Happened like a year ago, but still. For reference, I was a 13-year-old male at the time and lived in a relatively well-off neighborhood. So, in the summer of 2020, my dad wanted my brother and I to walk 5,000 steps every day and get outside. The day before this story, my brother and I had a bit of an argument, so I decided to go alone. I'm about a third of the way around the block on lap 2/2 when I noticed this old guy walking behind me. My block is a horseshoe with an inner circle. Most of the time, I and most people follow the path of the horseshoe. So, to test whether or not the guy was intentionally following me, I walked across the street and skipped the nice scenic route. I, being resourceful, pulled out my phone to look at some texts, but in reality I was using my front-facing camera to see if he was still following me, because slightly turning my head and using peripheral vision may have aroused suspicion for him, causing a scary chase or battle to ensue. He was still following me. I doubt it was because he wanted to take the short way from the heat, since it was a nice 0 wind, 70 Fahrenheit day. I started to pick up the pace, and using my phone again, I noticed the man had also started to walk significantly faster. At this point I was really terrified, so I speed walked home in an inconspicuous chase. I ran up the driveway and closed the then open garage door as fast as I could. When I went into the entryway facing the street to talk with my dad and watched to see if the man passed, I noticed that after a few minutes the man definitely did not walk by, as he was probably about 30 yards behind me and thus would not have had time to have gone past before I got inside. I'm not sure if something bad could have happened due to where I live, but it's still pretty scary thinking of the possibilities. My grandma and I almost died from a gas leakage. She noticed something was wrong, got up and immediately collapsed. I was in bed watching TV, and I didn't realize I was life-flated until I got up to help her. I was not able to sit straight, so I had to crawl on my floor, leaning against the wall. We lived in a yard with multiple houses and my parents were in the house next to my grandmother's, so I had to continue crawling, even if I was barely able to hold any balance whatsoever, and I was also very confused. I managed to enter the hallway and go in front of their room. They saw me, looked very concerned, and then I collapsed. Next thing I know I was in my parents' bed tucked in. Fortunately everything was fine with both of us, but scary and confusing AF. I've had hallucinations since as long as I can remember, but I guess as a dumb kid I never grasped that it was weird. Like, I knew what I was seeing wasn't real. I just thought that that's what people meant by your eyes playing a trick on you. I guess one of the worst was a recurring one I dubbed the Tree Man, because he's tall and lanky and bony, like a tree. I was creative, but anyhow, this thing looked like the actual Algonquian descriptions of a Wendigo, not the pop culture thing with horns. I mean an inky black 8 to 10 foot tall shadowy figure thinner than paper with a mouth stretching from ear to ear and rows of sharp pointed gnarly teeth. I just kinda accepted his presence, and while he never tried to hurt me, he sure made me uncomfortable. He'd stand in the corner and watch me laying in bed. He once caught my foot out from under the blanket and began caressing it, making horrible eye contact, despite having skin pulled over the divots where his eyes should be, and just overall being creepy. I told my friend about it, and they all said it must be a demon, but I've always been a skeptic, and so me being dumb claimed the more likely explanation was that I just had really weird sleep paralysis, where I just didn't get paralyzed. I was about 10 years old. I came home from school and immediately took off my shoes and backpack and started playing video games. In the house I grew up in, my parents' bedroom was right above the living room, so when I heard 4 distinct footsteps above me, I thought nothing of it because I was so used to hearing my parents walking around. Then I remembered I was home alone. My eyes got wide, I froze, and I wondered what I should do. I decided to go to the kitchen and grab the biggest knife I could find and go up there. I cautiously walk upstairs into my parents' bedroom, bathroom, and closet, and there was nothing there. Me, my sister, and my mom had some pretty weird experiences in this house. Dark figures and feeling like you were being watched was normal. My mom even saw a dark figure standing over her and watching her while she was sleeping, but that was my scariest experience. Catholic upbringing here. There was a priest who taught at our school, and it was obvious he hated girls. He was always very nasty to us, and I detested him. In later years it emerged that he'd been abusing the boys in the school. I cried and cried when I learned this. We always thought the boys were lucky because he was nice to them. It broke my heart to think of some of the lovely young lads he ruined, and of how close an escape we girls had. I'm in my 60s now, and I've never been able to shake it off. 3.5 years old, playing on a tricycle near our house. We lived in the middle of a row of townhouses with a bit of distance to where I was from the parking lot. Two very obese men got out of a white van walking towards me asking if I wanted to go to a Sunday school they ran with tons of toys and other kids. Confused by and trying to imagine what they were describing, I just kind of froze in place as they continued to walk very purposefully towards me. My older sister showed up, grabbed my arm, dragged me quickly back to our home, telling me we don't talk to strangers. A few years later, my mom showed us and some friends some pictures of police sketches of two familiar looking men in the newspaper telling us the police were warning children to watch out for these two. I was in grade 5 or 6, and I was at a friend, Hans, place with a few others for a sleepover party. We decided to go out for a walk around the block. When it was dark, I was kinda freaked out by that. I was a nervous kid and didn't know the area too well, but I agreed to go. We got to the end of his street to a main drag, and I was like, nah, we should go back home. My friends disagreed and wanted to go on. I just said I was heading back and turned around. Then I heard them whisper shouting my name. I turned around, and they are hiding behind the car and frantically gesturing me over to them. In the middle of the road, this car has stopped, headlights on, just idling there. There was something really sinister about it. I ran over to my friends, and they said their car had stopped and crept along. When it saw me walking alone, we decided to make a break for it down an alleyway that would lead back to where we'd come from. We ran so fast, but at the other end of the alley, bam, the car pulls to a stop and sees us. We turn and run back the other way and eventually make it back to my friend's house. When we get there, we realize one of our friends, Andy, is missing. We tell Hans' dad about it, and we go back down the alleyway we tried to escape down, and found Andy sitting with a lady on her porch. Turns out, he'd thrown himself into their hedges to hide from the guys in the car. While we ran off, the car had stopped, and the guys had gotten out and looked for him. They walked to this lady's garden and her floodlights had come on. They got back in their car and drove off, while Andy went to get help from the lady. We were all shaken, but unhurt, and we'd come so close to being hurt or kidnapped or whatever. I was once visiting relatives at my aunt's house, whom lives in Mexico City. Anyhow, at the end of the 4-story house, I was hiding in what is my cousin's room. As kids at the time we were playing hide and seek, so I hid underneath my cousin's bed in her room. However, for some reason as a few seconds went by I heard what sounded like someone was jumping on the bed. It made a squeaking noise. I had a clear view underneath the bed so no one could be on the bed as there's only 2 sides. To get onto the bed as it was placed in front of a dresser and in the corner of the bedroom next to a wall. Nope, TF out there quick. Overall her house is really creepy. There's more experiences within that house, but this one intrigues me, since I like to say I've played hide and seek with a ghost. My dad once told me a story that went something like this. My dad and his cousins used to love exploring haunted places, whether it was a popular myth around their town, or whether some crazy person claimed they saw a ghost on the street. They would go and investigate it. One day my dad and his cousins were out and wandering again. Then someone told them about a gold Virgin Mary that was in this cave. It was hard to carry because it was pure gold, and every time it got pushed, the Golden Mary would always move itself back to its original spot. So off they went to get the gold statue. They found the cave. They saw these chains there, and they walked past them. They pushed the Virgin Mary, but no matter how far it went, it would always move itself back. They went out, and this old person was standing there. They said that the only way to take it was to chain up one person and a demon would take them once they left. They aren't stupid, so they left. Obviously no one wanted to be chained up, so they all just walked away.